years ago, my guest made the most accurate forecast for how Bitcoin would close off 2020 amongst all the popular Bitcoin pundits and advocates in the world. Max Keiser had forecasted $20,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2020. So how is he expecting Bitcoin to close off in 2021? He has chosen this platform, Stansberry Research, and my show to give his most coveted and highly anticipated Bitcoin forecast for the year. This is the show to watch if you care about Bitcoin. Welcome back. Happy New Year, Max Keiser.
Oh, Daniela, it's always a pleasure to see you, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers. And I see your show is growing in popularity exponentially, almost as fast as Bitcoin.
Big time, yes. And like I said, I'm very happy that you've come around and have decided to give me your Bitcoin forecast, and we will get to it in a bit. But first, I've prepared something special for you, Max, because this is not an ordinary show. This is a very special show. And I've created a game for you called Seen and Overheard on the Street about Bitcoin. Common things we often hear about Bitcoin. I want to get your take on it.
Yeah, well, before we begin, I'm going to make a statement.
Go ahead.
This is salt. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with Bitcoin? And I'll tell you what it has to do with Bitcoin. The British Empire was defeated by Indians under Mahatma Gandhi because they made their own salt. And back in 2009, the beginning of Bitcoin, it was the cypherpunks and everybody who was objecting to central bank authoritarianism who got together and said, we're going to make our own money. We're going to make our own money. It's called Bitcoin, and it's passive resistance, and it's going to topple the central bank empire, the central banks around the world. I predict, one of my predictions will be one of the major central banks in the world will collapse in 2021. They're highly leveraged. As your guest, Jim Rickards, points out many times, these banks are leveraged 50, 60, 70 to 1. They're leveraged more than long-term capital management was when long-term capital management was at its highest point of leverage. So Rickards would know about this stuff. And one of them is going to collapse in 2021, and that will start an avalanche out of fiat money and paper money, and the top beneficiary of that will be Bitcoin. That's one of the catalysts for a price appreciation in 2021. But my point is this, Daniela, Bitcoin is a protest against fiat money, central banks, authoritarianism. And the way the protest works is the cypherpunks and everyone involved in Bitcoin, essentially, we made our own money. It's perfect money. It has nothing to do with the state. You've separated for the first time in history state from money. It's never been done before, ever. And now it has been finished. It has been completed. It has been figured out, and it's been launched, and it's out there for 10, 11 years, and it's working. And the nation state, as we know it, is going to dissolve. Central banks are going to dissolve, and fiat money is going to go the way of all fiat money has gone over 300 years. Not a single fiat money, paper money scheme has lasted over the past 300 years. They've all gone to zero or lost 99% of their purchase power. So it should be no shock to anyone that the US dollar is going to go to zero. The British pound looks particularly horrible. That's definitely going to go to zero. All the fiat money is going to go to zero. And of course, the chief beneficiary of that would be Bitcoin. And these are the catalysts. These are the catalysts to see this price projection, and why, you know, when we get into the numbers, you'll understand more why I have the number that I have.
Yeah, and I'm excited, and I can't wait to get to the number. And I agree with you that I think a big portion of it is a protest against fiat currency. But on the other side of the equation, a lot of it is people who are looking at this price of Bitcoin just skyrocketing, thinking, I need to jump on this train and get rich with it.
Right. Well, it's a magical kind of metamorphosis that turns greed into altruism. You know, Bitcoin attracts a lot of greedy people who want to make money trading on Bitcoin, but as they're defunding central banks, and they're defunding fiat money, and they're defunding the nation state. So it's a very interesting technology that turns greed into the hardest money ever known in the human history. So the greedy folks, we need the greedy folks. You know, people come for the greed, they stay for the revolution.
I think that people's concern, and we'll get to it in my game that I'm excited to play, seen and overheard about Bitcoin, is that, it's, and you've heard this before. I'm not saying it. This is the ultimate bubble when your 12-year-old nephew, this happened to me this weekend, came over and asked me, Auntie, how do I buy Bitcoin?
Well, the biggest bubble in the world by far is the bond bubble. So it's in a 300-year, it took 300 years for the bonds in the UK to get this extended and into a bubble. It took over 240 years for the American debt market to get into this bubble. It's so far in a bubble that's gone negative. Interest rates in the sovereign bond market are now actually negative. So that not even Bernie Madoff, got his Ponzi scheme to that level of extremity. So that is by far the biggest bubble in the world, is the U.S. bond market and the sovereign debt market. Then you have behind that, I would say, the fiat money currency. The U.S. dollar is in an enormous bubble. You've got a lot of, still some property markets are in a huge bubble. And probably the one asset in the world now that's undervalued, that's not even very close to getting into a valuation that it should be commensurate with the rest of the markets, would be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the cheapest asset in the world you can buy. As Paul Tudor Jones has said, it's the fastest horse in the race. Paul Tudor Jones doesn't have to say much to make a huge statement. He said that the Bitcoin price is mispriced. He said the Bitcoin price is, whenever he sees something as mispriced as Bitcoin, he gets excited to see that. And what he means by that is what I've just said, essentially, is that everything else pretty much is in a bubble. Bitcoin is one of the only assets probably that's not a bubble. It's in the most undervalued asset probably in the world today.
Yeah, and I think that's such a mind shift, and a hard concept for many to grasp, what you're saying right there, Max.
Right. Well, as I said, the central banks are in a bubble. I mean, if you have a 50, 60, 70 time leverage is an enormous bubble. You've got stocks trading at 1,000 times earnings, 1,500 times earnings. Tesla stock trading at over 1,000 times earnings. I mean, by any standard measure of valuation, that would be bubble territory.
All right.
You've got a lot of bubbles in asset prices that have been fueled by central bank printing. Here's the chart of M2 money supply growth, which is growing at 20% a year. Bitcoin price is staying ahead of that M2 growth. It's the only asset that's, you got true price discovery. That's reflecting true money printing. Gold is not, doesn't have good price discovery in gold because it's been almost 100% financialized. That's why gold is lagging as badly as it is, and it's not a good store of value in this type of money printing. This is also why corporations like MicroStrategy under Michael Saylor has said, look, the real inflation rate is 20% a year. It's not 1.5% a year. It's not 2% a year. That's a government published number that doesn't take into consideration the massive asset valuations that are popping, that are in bubble territory. That is very convenient for those who are doing the printing. Is it coincidence that the people who do the printing of the money are the ones that are benefiting the most from the printing of the money? No, that's by design. It's incredibly corrupt. But the real number is 20%. And Bitcoin is true price discovery that's outside of the control of central banks and government, because you've separated government from perfect money. So you have real price discovery. And Bitcoin is telling us that this 20% money supply growth per year is resulting in a hyperinflationary collapse of the U.S. dollar against Bitcoin. Let me repeat that. The U.S. dollar is in a hyperinflationary collapse right now against Bitcoin. And the markets, that's what the markets are telling us. I'm a free marketeer. I look at markets. When markets tell me stuff, they send signals. I read those signals and I invest accordingly. And that's what the market's telling us, that price discovery in Bitcoin is accurate and true. Price discovery in these other assets is completely manipulated, and it's demonstrably manipulated. JP Morgan just paid huge fines for manipulating the gold price. That used to be a conspiracy theory.
And then they made all their money back. The same amount they paid in fines they made back this year.
Right, JP Morgan, they paid $1 billion in fines for manipulating gold, and they paid the fine by, you guessed it, manipulating gold.
So we're going to talk about gold a little later, and you mentioned a good point there. But I want to get into the nitty gritty of Bitcoin here. And the point of the game is really to bring up, things we commonly hear about Bitcoin. So with more and more interest now on Bitcoin, you saw it making the front page of the Financial Times. Everyone wants to know about Bitcoin. I want you to dispel or poo-poo or agree with things we commonly hear about Bitcoin. So here we go. Seen and overheard on the street at Katz's Deli. Bitcoin is the world's first distributed, decentralized Ponzi scheme. Max Keiser.
It's demonstrably, provably not a Ponzi scheme. As a matter of fact, it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. In a Ponzi scheme, the base of the Ponzi scheme has to constantly get wider and bigger. The new money has to keep coming in to pay the investors off who have gotten into the Ponzi scheme early. That's a Ponzi scheme, as Charles Ponzi created the Ponzi scheme with his scheme of, I believe it was stamps, and they had a stamp collecting Ponzi scheme, and that's where we get the term from. And we now also look at Bernie Madoff was running a bit of a Ponzi scheme in that he was paying off investor returns with the new money coming in. Now let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually the opposite. Every 4 years, the amount of money that's mined on a daily basis shrinks by 50% in what's called the halving. So we started off with 50 coins per distribution on the mining output per 10 minutes. And then we had a halving down to 25, and then a halving down to 12.5, and a halving down to 6.25. So actually it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. The amount of money that's entering the system is shrinking, not expanding. So that's a very simple point. And anyone who calls it a Ponzi scheme, A, doesn't know what a Ponzi scheme is, and B, has never looked at Bitcoin for more than 5 seconds, or just accepted like a Nouriel Roubini tweet as if that has a meaning, but he's never looked at it either. So that's demonstrably, provably wrong.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you know what 2 + 2 = 4, then you know that this is not a Ponzi scheme if you look at a definition of a Ponzi scheme and you look at the distribution of coins within Bitcoin. It's so simple that any 9-year-old would look at this for 5 minutes and tell you exactly the same thing. But again, we have a mainstream media that doesn't qualify to have the intelligence of a 9-year-old. They simply repeat propaganda points because they're propagandists.
Oh, seen and overheard on the street. The only thing Bitcoin has going for it is a rising price. Without it, it would tank.
Well, that's again, not true. So what Bitcoin has for it is that it's a savings technology, the best savings technology ever invented, the best hard money that's ever been invented. And humans have a real need for hard money to do trade. Humans like to trade and they want hard money. That's what, over the thousands of years, gold kind of evolved to be a great way to trade in something that had store of value, so that I accepted your gold today for goods and services. I could respend that gold in the future. And you couldn't do that so well with beads and shells or, the different things that have been tried for money for many years. And gold was doing a pretty good job for a long time. Then Bitcoin came around and it's doing a better job than gold because it's scarcer than gold. So it's harder than gold. It's absolute scarcity of 21 million coins. Gold is inflating at, let's say, 2% a year. And we know that if the price of gold goes up, the technology to find more gold will also increase. So that number could go 3, 4, 5, 6% a year, just like we saw in the energy markets. It's not, the gold supply is elastic. It's not inelastic. It's not finite. It's elastic. So that's a problem. Number two, it's unlike gold, it's unconfiscatable. When I was saying Bitcoin, you cannot confiscate Bitcoin. You cannot censor Bitcoin. It's portable, more portable than gold. It's more divisible than gold. So it's on every single key point that you like gold, Bitcoin does a better job. It's hard money and it's a store of value. That's its primary purpose. That's its number one goal. Why is it going up in price? Is because we live in a world of hundreds of trillions and quadrillion of fiat money that is destroying people's lives, destroying economies, creating wealth and income gaps that are creating social unrest. And it feeds malfeasance. Every time the U.S. government makes a stupid mistake, they paper it over by printing more money. Same thing with all these other G20 countries. since 1971, since we went off the gold standard. If you make a mistake, you make a blunder with your policy, just paper it over with more printed money. Oh, by the way, does that create more cantillionaires at the top who then control more of government, and the corruption goes wider, and the people at the bottom are getting poorer and the purchasing power is weakening? Yes, it does. But tell that to the people who are printing the money and putting it into their pocket. They don't care.
This game is getting you fired up. When new buyers stop coming in, then Tether buys and manipulates the price higher.
Tether is 7% or less of the market. It was big in 2017. That was a talking point from 2017. It was resurrected recently. I think Rubini likes to keep talking Tether, Tether, Tether. Again, no, he has no understanding of this at all and has never done any research on it. He just farts into his Twitter account and expects everyone to think that his farts smell really good. But guess what, Nuriel? Your farts stink and your logic is broken, and you haven't even spent 3 minutes studying this and how NYU keeps you employed. As an NYU alumnus, I've sent a few letters to them saying he needs to be fired, gotten rid of immediately. He's a plague at NYU. He's embarrassing alumnus like myself at NYU with his utter contempt for civility and, well, maybe not civility, but intelligence. And it's gross. And he should be gotten rid of. I don't care if he's got tenure. So Tether is not a factor. Tether is not in play. It was brought about in 2017 as a way to trade in and out of Bitcoin into a US dollar surrogate. It's basically a money market. You know, money markets have a use. People trade in and out of a money market. If I have an account full of stocks and I sell my stock and I go into a money market until I find a new stock. Same thing with a Tether or a stable coin or a US dollar type cryptocurrency. It's like a money market. And like in the money markets in 2008, remember, there was a threat that it would break the buck because money markets are not, exactly 100% a guaranteed piece of paper. Yeah, there's counterparty risk with basic money market account. Hello, if this is news to you, wake up. Your money market has counterparty risk. So does Tether. So does every security in the world. So does every exchange in the world. The only thing without counterparty risk is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no counterparty risk. That's something else gold doesn't have. Gold has counterparty risk. Gold has verification risk. Gold is expensive. It costs 7% a year to store it, to verify it, to transport it. Gold is expensive on all counts.
I'm kind of surprised. And like I said, we'll get to gold in a bit, but this anger towards gold, because you own gold, you own silver. And last time we spoke, you liked gold.
I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm simply getting into the groove, baby. I'm funky.
Yeah, no, I love it.
I'm funky, not angry. Funk is different than angry. You wouldn't say James Brown is angry. He's funky, right? He gets it on the one, and he's going down that path, right? I'm funky, baby. I'm not angry.
Let's keep
so let's get on the path. So gold is, yes, I own gold. I own silver, and I've owned them for a long time. I started buying gold at $400 an ounce. I started buying silver at $500 an ounce, and I've got a lot of silver. I'll wager you that I've got more gold and silver bullion than Peter Schiff has personally.
Why wouldn't you sell it? Would you sell it and just go all in Bitcoin?
Well, a lot of it is actually hard to get to. It's hard to move it. It's sitting in a warehouse, and it's actually difficult to sell gold and silver. This is why it's not great. I've tried to sell it and move it and do a lot of stuff to it, but it's actually not that easy to do.
Why? Do you have it outside the U.S.?
Without going into particulars, Daniela, it's not easy to move, transport, etc. And I have sold some, but it's not an easy asset class to deal with. Okay,
I can get two more in here. I like this one because I'm a culprit of it being part of the media. Okay, Bitcoin, it can melt down, but you can't melt it down. Bitcoins are not shiny, golden, and metallic as media has you believe. Bitcoins are just 32-byte numbers, nothing more than that. And when the market crashes, you can't melt them down or use them as jewelry or for electrical circuits.
Well, you said like 2 or 3 different things there, but I'll try to unpack it as best I can.
It was a long sentence I overheard. But I think the point is it wrong to depict Bitcoin, and like I said, I'm a culprit of it, as this shiny gold object that we show in our B-roll when it's just 32-byte numbers that you can't really do anything with?
No, well, you should in your B-roll, you should show Bitcoin as a what's called a coin kite, a digital device that holds Bitcoin. It's a company up in Canada, and it's a way to the equivalent of a shiny gold ounce, but it's just the media lazily likes to put up gold coins to depict Bitcoin, and so that's their problem, not my problem.
Okay, let's end with this one. Let's end with this one. Overheard on 72nd Street, New York City. Max Keiser is either Satoshi Nakamoto or Kaiser Soze. I heard it.
I'm Satoshi Kaiser Nakamoto Soze.
All right.
No, I'm not Satoshi Nakamoto. And
Okay.
the cypherpunk 20-year history that preceded Bitcoin is well documented. There are 4 or 5 attempts to create a Bitcoin that goes back 20 years. Adam Back, for example, is involved in one of these e-cash types of, or e-gold. And even back in 1995, 96, I created the virtual specialist technology. So I actually have a patent on the first digital currency in the world. And that patent was sold to Cantor Fitzgerald on Wall Street. And they use it and they make hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue on that patent. And so I'm quite familiar with this whole history and this technology and the software. But I'm not the guy who wrote the white paper in 2008. And Kaiser Soze is more, I would say, to my liking as an archetype for Max Kaiser, because Kaiser Soze was the thing you never saw coming, but just obliterated everything in its path.
Okay. On that note, Bitcoin is for the people, by the people. So I asked our many viewers and your fans, my fans, to take part in this episode by sending in their questions. And, we got, numerous questions sent in. I obviously can't go through all of them. So I thought we could do some sort of lightning round here with you, Max, and get some of these pressing questions people want answers to. So this one comes from @Lobberhorn If Max is not worried about government regulation and interference in Bitcoin, please explain why.
Right, because first of all, there's nothing the government can do to stop Bitcoin. So there's no way to regulate Bitcoin. And that's what the governments are finding out. They would love to regulate it and they would love to stop it. But so far they've been unsuccessful because the computational power that runs Bitcoin, running at about 160 quintillion calculations per second, is beyond the reach of any government or any group of governments. So it's achieved escape velocity. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if governments really wanted to, they may have been able to thwart Bitcoin. But now it's too late. It's simply escape velocity has been achieved, and there's nothing any government can do. Number one. Number two, you've got people inside government that are now pro-Bitcoin. So you've got a senator from Wyoming, for example, who is absolutely pro-Bitcoin, who's lobbying for Bitcoin, who wants to change the state of Wyoming to be a Bitcoin state. They've got a Bitcoin bank. And they want to compete with Delaware. They want to compete with other states. So you've got on the senatorial level, Bitcoin is making inroads. You've got people in Congress, in the Senate, who own Bitcoin, who are not going to fight Bitcoin because they would benefit by owning Bitcoin. They love Bitcoin. It's a fifth column working inside the government. So they're not motivated to stop Bitcoin. Number four, what is more likely is that in the next couple of years, the government, the U.S. government, the IRS will come to Bitcoiners and say, hey, Bitcoiners, we'll give you a 90% discount on your taxes if you pay us in Bitcoin. Because the government's going to be woefully underrepresented in Bitcoin as other countries around the world are racing ahead and they're accumulating Bitcoin and they're mining Bitcoin. So America right now is not even entered the hash war or hash race or Bitcoin race with these other countries. Remember, in the 1960s, America entered the space race to compete with the Soviet Union to get into outer space, and there was that Sputnik moment. But America hasn't had their Bitcoin moment yet. We're still letting these other countries around the world grab the brass ring, to grab the momentum, and to now moving ahead of the U.S. there's a possibility, for example, Iran could be the richest country in the world because it's aggressively mining Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin right now. Does the U.S. want that to be the outcome? Well, if they don't start moving now and start accumulating Bitcoin, then that's the outcome. So hello, third world status, goodbye American century, goodbye U.S. dollar. So the more likely outcome is that the government is not regulating Bitcoin so much as they need to accumulate. They're gonna set an industrial policy where it's going to be we're going to subsidize energy and we're going to mine and accumulate Bitcoin because we want to be number one. If they don't want to be number one, America, then step aside and let some other country be number one because you're too fat and lazy. Get the fuck out of the way.
Okay, let's try and get some other questions in here. Okay, George Ruiz asks, what is the biggest Bitcoin correction that Max expects in 2021? Does he notice any correction patterns?
The corrections in Bitcoin have been successfully getting less and less and less. I mean, I've went through 3 80 to 90% corrections, in Bitcoin since 2011. So, but since then we've had less and less and less. So we just experienced a 20% correction. And so now that correction's over and now we start going higher. And so it'll start to behave more like an asset class where you might see 10 to 20% corrections. The 30, 40, 50% corrections, I think we're past that because the size of the market's gotten to be a lot bigger and the amount of money on the sidelines waiting to get in is enormous. The biggest money funds in the world, BlackRock, Stan Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, Mass Mutual Insurance Company, they're all sitting on the bid, hoping to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And that's only going to get bigger and bigger. Sovereign wealth funds are going to get into this, et cetera. So the corrections will be less and less and less.
Okay. I like this one a lot. At Resnoir Applebee's writes, Nigel Farage recently supported Bitcoin. How does Max view political support? And does he see Bitcoin becoming a right versus left issue? Really good question.
Bitcoin is not right or left. It's on its own vector. It's on its own path. And it, as I said, it disintermediates the nation state. So you don't need politicians. You don't need politicians. You don't need right or left. You just have the hardest money asset in the world, and you're free to trade with anybody. And this is the thing. Fiat money promotes war. Paul Krugman over at the New York Times said that the U.S. dollar is backed with men with guns. He admitted in the New York Times that the U.S. dollar fosters violence. It's backed by violence. It's terrorism in a little slip of paper. The U.S. dollar is a terrorist note. This essentially is backed by financial terrorism, whereas Bitcoin is peace. So if I want to get some Bitcoin from you, I have to offer you something that you're willing to take and trade for Bitcoin. So there's no coercion because it's unconfiscatable. I cannot confiscate or coerce the Bitcoin out of you. So I can only get it through peaceful trade. So that hopefully appeals to the angels of our better nature, us as humans, and we move away from this violence and the paper money and the fiat money and the U.S. foreign policy and the politicians that love violence. They live on violence. We don't want that anymore. We want peace. We want Bitcoin.
Okay. I like this one too. This is from LaChance, wants to know, who will Max phone when he's about to be a trillionaire? Who is your phone a friend? And they add, it can't be Peter Schiff. I don't think it would be. But I want to add, it also can't be Stacy. So who's your phone a friend?
You, Daniela. I'm going to call you immediately. We're going to
rule the world.
We're going to get us twins into a spaceship. We're going to fly to Mars. We're going to meet Elon Musk. We're going to make space omelets on Mars with Elon Musk with the twins.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. I'm going to combine these two because they came up a lot from Prism Studios and David Sutherland. Both want to know, ask Max if he's ever going to sell his Bitcoin. So what would it take for Max Keiser to sell his Bitcoin? And this is a personal question, but came up a lot. People want to know how much Bitcoin you own.
Well, I'm probably not going to sell my Bitcoin. I'm going to pass it on to the next generation. I think I have a responsibility to do that. And number two, I wouldn't want to sell Bitcoin back into fiat and give power peace, turn peace back into war. So, and I'm not motivated in any way to sell any Bitcoin. The more I hold, the hodler, I keep going hodling Bitcoin. The faster the revolution happens away from war, and we enter an era of peace. The thing about that holds humans back is something that's a vestige from our days, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Hard-coded in our mind is this instinct toward fear, and that's what holds us back. Bitcoin gets rid of our fears. and replaces it with love. And with a pure love in our hearts and our minds, we can move on to some different evolutionary step of greater good. And that's what we need to do. So I wouldn't want to put the Bitcoin I have back into fiat money circulation to feed, and then somebody in Washington will turn that into a bomb, and they'll go kill somebody in a foreign country because they're sadists. I don't want that. You know, we got a bunch of sadists running this country, and that's not, and they run by fiat money. Every time they kill 100,000 people, they go print more money. It's disgusting.
And how much, you own? I understand why you wouldn't want to disclose that, but is there a range you could share?
Well, I mean, I started buying it at $1, and that was 10 years ago. So, there's a lot of zeros.
All right. We'll respect your privacy there. All right, let's end with one that I thought was very sensitive and sweet. Nicola Cairncross would like to know what Max was like as a child. Did he know he was a super genius? Was he nurtured, or did he feel like a misfit? Did he have any mentors, or did he read any specific books that opened his eyes and made him think differently? So what was childhood like for Max Keiser?
Well, one book I love is Critical Path by Buckminster Fuller. And he is really an antecedent to Bitcoin in that he speculated on there being a money made of energy, purely of energy, by energy. And he also, very early in his life, decided to not do anything unless it benefited the world in total, as a whole. So he came up with the geodesic dome and these types of things that were were great for humanity. He got out of this idea of thinking that he was only into self-aggrandizement. He's just thinking globally all the time. And that book, Critical Path, which is his book, it's a great book to read.
So how old were you when you read that? Like you were like 12?
I read that in the womb.
Of course you did. Of course you did. That answers her question. He was born a genius, people.
I was hardly able. I was not even finished with the book, and the doctors are pulling me out of my mother's womb. Ass first, I might add.
The page.
I was a breech baby, so my ass came out first, and basically that's how I entered life. Like, kiss my ass, world. I'm trying to finish my book, right? And it was like, I'm doing something here.
All right, let's get to the moment the people have waited patiently for, including myself. I do not know your forecast yet. I'm going to learn it for the first time right now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. Max Keiser's 2021 Bitcoin forecast. You're hearing it for the first time here, folks.
I'm going with $220,000 per Bitcoin as a 2021 target. And that would bring us up to over $4 trillion market valuation, which I think is a good 2021 objective. We were going to catch up to gold. That would bring us up to not quite half gold's valuation, but getting close to gold's valuation. I think the catalyst is going to be, as I said, a major central bank failing, plus the money printing is going to go absolutely Weimar Republic. So we're going to see that, depending on how you calculate this, the 10 to 15 trillion that was printed in the last
so 220,000 per Bitcoin. When you come up with these forecasts, like I said, 2 years ago, you accurately predicted the 2020 forecast. How do you come up with these numbers? Are you sitting at the table with a calculator? Are you, baking your cheesecake and it comes to you? Like, how do you get to that number?
Yeah, I like the image of me baking a keto cheesecake and thinking about all these things. Well, first of all, some of it's proprietary. I can't go into the minutia because, this is the secret sauce of my whole enterprise. I don't want to get too specific. But having said that, there's certain trends that you can put into your calculation. So we just had a halving, right? We had the third halving in Bitcoin. There's three things in Bitcoin that people like Nouriel Roubini never mention: the halvings, the difficulty adjustment, and the hash rate. Now, that would be like me being a real estate broker and trying to sell real estate and telling people that I don't know where the house is, I don't know how big the house is, and I don't know who owns the house. Would you be a successful real estate broker? No. So Nouriel Roubini never mentions the halving, the hash rate, or the difficulty adjustment, and he pretends to come across as somebody whose opinions we should have some respect for, when clearly he's a propagandist, NYU lackey, kind of fart inhaling moron.
Okay, so Rubini is your target today. We get it. But that
okay,
that
let me get back to the question. So the halving happens every 4 years. So the supply gets cut in half. So that then you input that into the demand. So the demand is going, the demand's going higher, right? All these huge money folks are coming in to Bitcoin. Then the supply is shrinking. For example, there's 900 Bitcoin a day that are created, and the demand is over 4,000 a day. So that should tell you something right there. If you look at the exchanges, there's Bitcoin, kind of a snapshot of how many Bitcoin are circulating or in existence, being moved around. That is shrinking rapidly because institutions are taking Bitcoin. They're gobbling up that Bitcoin. We're going to enter a Bitcoin shortage. So a couple of things we haven't seen, we're going to see in 2021. We're going to see gap pricing. In terms of price discovery. So, okay, it's 36, 37,000. Once you get above 40,000, that panic buying from institutions comes in. You could see 42,000, and then the next print be 44,000, right? You're going to see.
Is it a straight up road to 220,000, or is there going to be major corrections along the way?
Well, like we just saw a 20% correction. I think we're going to see 10, 20% corrections all the time. And I don't know. I wouldn't say that this is where we end the year either. Probably this 220,000 number, probably you're going to see that in October, November will be the high of the year. If you look historically to how the Bitcoin's traded versus the halvings and the demand and the difficulty adjustment and the mining industry and the acceleration of the technology in the mining industry and how efficient miners are, the cost of electricity, right? That's also a factor in this calculation. So there's a lot of different things that come into it.
I also have a forecast for Bitcoin.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it. I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper, fold it, and put it into this desk that you don't see in the shot. And
I can tell you what yours is.
I know what yours is. Power too.
I know what yours is.
All right. Well,
I'm going to write down what I think yours is right now, and I'm going to put it into the safe. And
and then we'll switch.
And then you'll see.
We're going to share this.
Reveal your number. I'm like Kreskin, the amazing Kreskin on the Johnny Carson show. My number will match your number.
We're going to do a show like in November, end of 2021, where we will take out these pieces of papers. I'll do mine later, since I don't have paper right here. But the central bank that's going to close, shut down, blow up.
Right. So let's see. Well, the candidates are Bank of Japan, Bank of England, Federal Reserve Bank, European Central Bank. Probably the bank that is in the deepest quagmire of problems would be the ECB. I think the ECB will be dissolved and something will take its place. And they won't call it a crash necessarily. I think the ECB bank is going to be probably, let's call it they're going to get dissolved in 2021. And it's going to be replaced with some other facility. Like they could say, oh, we're going to do $1 trillion. We're going to do 100 trillion credit facility with special drawing rights from the IMF. Our friend Christine Lagarde and the ECB are going to get back together again and get the band back together again. And they're going to try to bail out the Eurozone, but they're going to have to dissolve the ECB first.
So they're going to market it like a rebrand.
Yeah. It's going to be, they're going to market it as a rebrand, a restart, a reset. They're going to call it a reset or a new Bretton Woods. Okay. So we've heard those terms already, right? A new Bretton Woods and a reset. So as part of that Bretton Woods / reset, they're going to come out of that meeting and say, here it is. And by the way, one of these banks, these central banks had to be dissolved. Exactly like in 2008 when Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns had to be sacrificed. They got into a room and Dick Fuld over there at Lehman Brothers was taken out back and shot in the head, right? And said, you've got to sacrifice. You've got to give all your assets to Jamie Dimon today or the country goes into receivership, Dick Fuld. Take one for the team, buddy.
Let's end on this note. If Bitcoin is at 220,000 in 2021, gold goes to.
Let's say gold gets in above 3,000. Hello?
Yeah, that's a very bullish call for gold.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, gold is not going to go away.
Yeah.
I mean, gold is not, I'm not in the camp that says Bitcoin is going to demonetize gold.
Okay.
I'm not in that camp. There is a group that says this, but gold is still the primary asset for all central banks.
Let's take
it's still the base layer money that runs the global economy, has done for 100, 300, 200 years, whatever.
Now that I'm on this path, I have to take it one step further or I'm going to get all these emails. Why didn't you ask him about silver then? Okay. Gold goes to 3,000. Where does silver go? Let's end it there.
Well, silver, when we did Crash JP Morgan buy silver back in 2011, it was at 15. We drove it to $50. And then that was the old high under the Hunt brothers. Then, of course, it dropped back down to the $11, $12, $13 range. Now it's trading higher. It's pushing high 20s, pushing 30. So I say that, yeah, it's going to get through that 50 level. And therefore, if I'm saying gold is up, blah, 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 I think silver, of course, is going to be well over $100.
Wow. Silver investors, you heard it here first.
Well, the miners are freaking cheap. The silver and gold miners are cheap. Yeah. Those stocks are freaking cheap. Even during what was the number one stock during the Depression? Home stake mining. Right?
I know, but we're still halfway from its original high. So, hearing triple digits, that's mind-blowing.
They're going to do great. I mean, if it wasn't for Bitcoin, those things would look awesome. But, Bitcoin's going to 10 to 20x those things.
Max Keiser, this is the greatest Bitcoin interview of all time.
Probably.
Thank you for giving it to me. I'm very thankful and grateful.
I'd love to give it to you, Daniela.
What a way to start 2021. Thank you, Max Keiser. So thorough. And I think people will learn a lot. I sure did.
If you see Nouriel Roubini, tell him I'm looking for him. I'm looking for you, Nouriel.
Many times to come on my show.
I was offered $100,000 to go debate Nouriel in London. And I said, for 150, I would do it. But for 100, it wasn't worth it to be in the same room with that pile of garbage.
Is it true Stephen Baldwin didn't listen to you about buying Bitcoin?
Yeah, I was going to pay Stephen Baldwin in Bitcoin when we made our film. I think it was 4 years together. We made a TV show, and I offered to pay him in Bitcoin, and he refused. I think he would be worth $60 to $70 million today.
Okay, how about Alec? Did Alec
Baldwin? I tried to give him Bitcoin 10 years ago when it was under $10. And I did give him Bitcoin, which he then lost. And I think that was now worth about $30 million. That's completely lost. Russell Brand, he just lost it because I gave him the keys. Russell Brand, I gave some Bitcoin to in London. He lost his Bitcoin as well. That's why people always tell me, oh, send me some Bitcoin. You have so many. I'm like, if I do, you're going to lose it, right? You have to earn it.
I won't lose it. I will cherish it.
That's what they all say. That's what they all say, Daniela.
Let's go find out.
I know your tricks.
Stash.
I know what's going on.
All right. Let's go find out.
Alex Jones. I offered to give Alex Jones 10,000 Bitcoin to give to his listeners. When this was in Bitcoin, it's under $5 to try to expand the Alex Jones empire.
Well, this is why you're walking around.
He said no.
Yeah, but look at you now, right?
He'd be that's like close to billionaire status, Alex Jones, to completely screwed up.
Well, now you are the
$300 million. You messed up.
You and Stacey are now the king and queen of the Bitcoin universe. And you guys deserve that success. So continue.
Join us.
Come to the Bitcoin side.
Come to the Citadel.
Thank you so much, Max Keiser. Give my love to Stacey. Thank you so much. This is Must Watch TV, guys. Thank you, Max Keiser.
Until next time.
And thank you for watching this incredible edition of Stansberry Research. We will have much more for you, so be sure to stay tuned to this channel. I'm Daniela Cambone. Thanks for watching.